Welcome to week 7 of English 102. This week we'll be focusing on subject-verb agreement and pronoun antecedent agreement. So what exactly is subject-verb agreement? Well, it's simply that the verb of a sentence must agree with the subject of the sentence in number, whether it's singular or plural, and person, whether it's first person, second person, or third person. There are several rules that we will need to learn when we talk about the subject of subject-verb agreement. The first of those rules is that singular subjects take singular verbs and plural subjects take plural verbs. Nouns ending in S are usually plural. There are some exceptions to that, of course, but nouns ending in S are usually plural, and verbs ending in S are usually singular. Look at these two sentences. The dog, singular, barks loudly. So the singular verb ends in an S. The second sentence, the dogs, plural, bark loudly. So the dog barks loudly, or the dogs bark loudly. So singular subjects take singular verbs, plural subjects take plural verbs. Rule number 2. The number of a subject is not usually affected by phrases that come between the subject and the verb. Let's consider a couple of examples. The cookies in the jar tempt me. Now we have here the subject cookies and the verb tempt, and they are separated by a prepositional phrase in the jar. Now if we lift the phrase in the jar out of the sentence, the cookies tempt me. So cookies, plural, has a plural verb, tempt. The cookies in the jar tempt me. The caramel in the cookies gives them flavor. Now don't be confused by the plural cookies, because that's not the subject of the sentence. Again, we have a prepositional phrase, in the cookies. So if we lift that phrase out, then it becomes the caramel gives them flavor. The caramel in the cookies gives them flavor. So we always have to make sure that we're identifying the subject and the verb and disregard anything that comes between them by way of determining whether it's singular or plural. Rule number 3. Compound subjects joined by the conjunction and take a plural verb. David and Jonathan were good friends. So David or Jonathan, either one is singular, but because we are giving the two of them connected by the conjunction and, it is a plural subject, so it takes a plural verb. David and Jonathan were good friends. Now sometimes subjects joined by and refer to only one person or are considered one thing. And in those cases, we use a singular verb. Take, for instance, this sentence. Spaghetti and meatballs is a favorite of many people. Now, it's two words connected by the conjunction and, but spaghetti and meatballs is considered a dish. It's not two items, but it's two items that are included in the name of a singular dish. So spaghetti and meatballs is a favorite of many people. Now if we took out spaghetti and just had meatballs, then meatballs are a favorite of many people because it is plural. It's giving the plural noun meatballs. But since this is a singular dish, spaghetti and meatballs is a favorite of many people. Rule number 4. Singular subjects connected by or and nor stay singular. Now this is where it might become a little bit confusing, but singular subjects that are connected by or and nor stay singular. Neither Bob nor Joe is able to take a week off from work. Now in this sentence we've got two subjects, as it were, Bob and Joe, but since it's talking about both of them individually, then it is a singular subject. Bob nor Joe is able to take a week off from work. If a singular and a plural subject are connected by or nor, the verb should agree with the subject closest to it. Either the boys or Mr. White is ready to help. Now in this sentence we've got a plural subject, boys, and we've got a singular subject, Mr. White. So the verb that is closest to, or the subject that is closest to the verb determines whether the verb is singular or plural. Let's reverse this sentence and see how it works. Either Mr. White or the boys are ready to help. So in this case, the plural subject, boys, is just before the verb, so the verb becomes plural. So either the boys or Mr. White is ready to help, or either Mr. White or the boys are ready to help. So a singular and a plural subject are connected by or nor, then what determines the number of the verb is the subject that is closest to it. Neither Bob nor the others were able to get a week off work, or neither the others nor Bob was able to get a week off work. So again, if it's the plural subject that is closest to the verb, then the verb will be plural. If it's the singular subject that's closest to the verb, then the verb will be plural, or singular, excuse me. Rule number 6, collective nouns. And a collective noun is a noun that names a group of things or people, maybe either singular or plural. Collective nouns that are singular in form, such as jury, team, class, family, committee, crowd, group, and others, may use a singular or a plural noun. When that collective noun acts as a unit, then it's singular. But when the members of the group act individually, then the collective noun is plural. Now it sounds a bit confusing, but let's look at a couple of examples. The herd is in the south pasture. Now in this sentence, the herd, the collective noun herd, is looked at or viewed as a unit. So we have a singular subject, the herd, even though it's made up of a number of these animals, it's the herd that we're talking about. But now, what if we're talking about the individual members of that herd? The herd run in different directions when frightened. Now, in this sentence, since we're talking about them all going into different directions, then each animal is acting individually. So therefore, the noun is going to be plural. So when it acts as a unit, it's singular. But when the members of the group act individually, the collective noun is plural. So the content in the context of the sentence determines whether the verb will be singular or plural. Rule number 7, the words there and here are rarely used as subjects. So when a sentence begins with there or here, you have to look carefully at the sentence to determine the subject of the sentence. Give consideration to this sentence. There are many devices in a man's heart. Now, in this sentence, you could look at it and say, well, there is the subject and are is the verb. But that's not the case. In this sentence, we have to look at what the sentence is about. This sentence is about devices. So, devices is the subject. There are many devices in a man's heart. So we have devices as a plural subject, and are is the plural verb. Here is the flashlight you needed. In this sentence again, here is not the subject, so we have to look at the sentence and determine what the sentence is about, which will tell us the subject of the sentence. In this sentence, the sentence is about flashlight. Here is the flashlight you needed. Now, flashlight is singular, so we have a singular verb, is. Here is the flashlight you needed. So the words here and there are rarely used as subjects, so when a sentence begins with one of those words, we need to determine what the sentence is about, as in the first sentence being devices, in the second sentence being flashlight. Expressions stating amounts, such as fractions, measurements, money, time, these expressions may be singular or plural. Now please note the second sentence there. Numbers that represent a single unit are considered singular. Look at these examples. $5 was the amount we settled for. 8 hours is enough time for sleep. 3/4 of the cake is gone. $1 million is a lot of money to hide under your mattress. Half the bridge is completed. Now in each of these we have different amounts. $5, 8 hours, 3/4, $1 million, and half. So these numbers represent a single unit. $5 is not considered being 5 individual dollars, but $5 is the singular amount. So we have $5 was. And that's the same it is with all 5 of these sentences. We have a singular verb, even though it's talking about a plural number of things. $5 was, 8 hours is, 3/4 is, $1 million is, half the bridge is. So expressions stating amounts may be singular or plural. Now, generally, use a plural verb when human beings are implied. Now, this is a little difficult, but it's one of those rules that we just simply have to learn. 3/4 of the boys are going. Now, again, if we were referring to 3/4 of a thing, 3/4 of the cake is eaten, then it would be a singular verb. But when it's referring to people, to human beings, we are using a plural verb. 3/4 of the boys are going, half of these people are married, 1/4 of these people are students, 10% of the youth are going on the mission trip. So again, it's a rule that we just simply need to learn. When we're talking about units of measurement and referring to those units as a singular thing, an amount of dollars or amount of inches or whatever, then it's singular. But when those expressions stating amounts refer to people, they are going to be plural. Rule number 9. Literary works, works of art, organizations, and countries are usually singular even if they appear to be plural in form. Nighthawks is a painting by Edward Hopper. Nighthawks here is not a plural of the bird, nighthawk, but it's the title of a painting. So that title, even though it sounds plural, is singular. The Girl Scouts is an entity, an organization. So the Girl Scouts the Girl Scouts was established in 1928. The Philippines is an island country in the Pacific Ocean. Now, the Philippines is singular, even though it's made up of several islands, it is singular. The country, the Philippines, is an island country in the Pacific Ocean. So, title of literary works, works of art, organizations, and countries are usually singular, even though they appear to be plural in form. Number 10, doesn't, isn't, and wasn't are singular and must be used with singular subjects, whereas don't, aren't, and weren't are plural and are to be used with plural subjects. Jesse doesn't like shrimp. They don't like shrimp. Jesse is the singular subject of the first sentence, so it takes the singular verb doesn't. They is the plural subject of the next sentence, so it uses the verb don't. He isn't afraid of heights. He is the singular subject, isn't is the singular verb. They aren't afraid of heights. They is the plural subject, aren't is the plural verb. She wasn't prepared for the exam. She, singular subject, wasn't, singular verb. They weren't prepared for the exam. They is the plural subject. Weren't is the plural verb. Rule number 10. There are a few words, although they appear to be plural in form, that actually take singular verbs. Mathematics, civics, measles, mumps, news. These are words that are plural in form, but they take a singular verb. Civics is an interesting course of study. Civics is the title of the course. So it's not talking about civics in the sense of plurality of civics, but it's talking about the singular course of study. Civics is an interesting course of study. Measles is extremely contagious. Now, again, measles has a plural form, but measles is the name of the disease. It's not a plurality of measles, it is measles. Measles is extremely contagious. So a few words, although they look plural, take singular verbs. Rule number 12. The verb agrees in number with the subject, not the predicate nominative. One of my real difficulties is cumulative exams. Now in this sentence, we have to first of all determine the subject of the sentence. Now we have the word difficulties right before the verb. Difficulties is plural, but we have a singular verb. Why is that? It's because of my real difficulties is a prepositional phrase. One is actually the subject. Now, Also, we've got a plural noun at the end of this sentence, exams. Sometimes we want to make the verb agree with that predicate nominative, but we have to make the verb agree with the subject. And the subject in this sentence is one. One is cumulative exams. One of my real difficulties is cumulative exams. Is a linking verb, and so the word that comes after it is either a predicate adjective or a predicate nominative. Here is predicate nominative because it is a noun. So one is cumulative exams. The verb agrees with the subject, not the predicate nominative. So the verb must agree with one, not the plural predicate nominative exams. One of my favorite games is charades. One of my favorite games is charades. So again, we have the subject one and the verb is, but it's followed by a plural, charades. That's the predicate nominative. The verb does not agree in number with the predicate nominative. It agrees in number with the subject. Rule number 13. Certain expressions, and I have some of those here in parentheses, as well as, including, together with, and others. These expressions logically seem to change a singular subject to a plural subject, but they don't. These expressions will be in commas, offset by commas. Bob, along with Joe and Tom, is going on vacation. Now, it would sometimes seem to be the case that we would change that to a plural verb because we have three different people mentioned. Bob, along with Tom or Joe and Tom, is going on vacation. But remember, that phrase offset by commas, along with Tom or Joe and Tom, is set off because it's not a part of the subject. Bob is the subject of this sentence. Bob is going on vacation. Now look at the second sentence. Joe, as well as Bob, plans to vacation on the golf course. And again, we have that phrase, as well as Bob, offset by commas, so it's not part of the subject. Joe is the subject. So it's a singular subject that takes a singular verb, plans. Joe plans to vacation on the golf course. Not Joe and Bob, but Joe, as well as Bob, plans to vacation on the golf course. We'll give our attention now for the conclusion of this week's study to pronoun agreement. Pronoun agreement certainly is not as complicated as subject-verb agreement. Now, we will look at several different rules again, but it's not nearly as complicated as subject-verb agreement. Once you know the rule, pronoun antecedent agreement is pretty simple. And the rule is this. Use a singular pronoun with singular antecedent. Use a plural pronoun with a plural antecedent. Bill and Tom are eating their tortilla chips. Neither Bill nor Tom is eating his tortilla chip. Each of the men is eating his tortilla chips. Everyone should eat his or her pizza. Now, let's consider each of these sentences individually. In the first sentence, we've got a compound subject, Bill and Tom. So that's a plural subject that would use the plural verb are. And then later in the sentence, we have the pronoun that is referring back to the subject. And since Bill and Tom is a compound subject, which makes it plural, then we would use a plural pronoun there. Bill and Tom are eating their tortilla chips. Now, the second sentence, neither Bill nor Tom is eating his. Neither makes this a singular subject. So we're talking about both of these men individually, not together. So we have a singular verb, is, and we have the pronoun his, the singular pronoun instead of the plural pronoun there. Each of the men is eating his tortilla chips. Each is a singular noun, even though we have men, but men is the object of the preposition of, so each is eating his, singular pronoun. Everyone should eat his or her, not their. Everyone is singular, not plural. Even though we have the word every, which sounds plural, but we have everyone, one is singular, everyone is singular. Everyone should eat his or her pizza. So, use a singular pronoun with a singular antecedent and a plural pronoun with a plural antecedent. Let's give our attention now to making verbs agree with pronoun subjects. Rule number 1. These indefinite pronouns are singular and take singular verbs. Each, either, neither, one, everyone, everybody, no one, nobody, anyone, anybody, someone, somebody. Now a couple of these are tricky because they actually sound plural, but in reality they are singular. Each of the boys has a new backpack. Either of the ties is suitable. Everyone on the team was prepared for the game. In these sentences, we have prepositional phrases that separate the subject from the verb. And we have these pronouns: each, either, and everyone. All of these are singular pronouns. So each has a new backpack, either is suitable, and everyone was. All of these are singular indefinite pronouns, and they will take a singular verb. Each has, either is, everyone was. Rule number 2. These indefinite pronouns are plural and take plural verbs. Both, few, several, and many. Both of the chairs were antiques. Several of the visitors have small children. Now again, we have prepositional phrases separating the subject from the verb. We lift out those prepositional phrases and we have both were antiques or several have small children. Both and several are plural pronouns, indefinite pronouns, so they take plural verbs. Rule number 3. These indefinite pronouns may be either singular or plural, and it's determined by their usage in a sentence. None of the corn has been harvested. None of the cows have been milked. Most of the game is usually exciting. Most of the spectators have arrived. We'll consider these sentences. The first two sentences have the subject none as the indefinite pronoun none as the subject. Now in the first sentence, none of the corn, corn is singular, so it will have a singular verb. None has been harvested. None of the corn has been harvested. In the second sentence, the none is identified by the plural cows, so none have been milked. So in the first sentence, none is singular. In the second sentence, none is plural. In the third sentence, most of the game is usually exciting. Game is singular, so most is determined by the singular game, and it's is. The verb is. But in the fourth sentence, most of the spectators have. Well, most in this sentence is identified by the plural spectators. So most have arrived. So we can see how these nouns, these pronouns may be either singular or plural, and it's dictated and determined by the usage in the sentence. Rule number 4. If the antecedent of who, which, or that is singular, use a singular verb. If the antecedent is plural, use a plural verb. Sam called the man who owns the rental property. Sam paid the men who own the rental property. Bob is one of the men who own the property. Bob is one man who owns the property. Now, each of these sentences has who. But how do we determine the verb, whether it's singular or plural? Well, we determine it by the subject. In the first sentence, Sam called the man, singular, who owns the property. So, man who owns. But in the second sentence, Sam paid the men who own the property. So, in this sentence, the antecedent of who is men, so we take a plural verb. In the third sentence, Bob is one of the men who own the property. So again, we have who, and the antecedent to it is the plural men. So we have the plural verb own. But in the last sentence, Bob is one man who owns the property. We have who, and the antecedent of who is man, singular, so we have a singular verb, owns. Sam called the man who, Sam paid the men who, Bob is one of the men who, Bob is one man who. And then the verb is determined by the number of the subject, the antecedent to the pronoun. Just a few things that we need to keep in mind as we think about proper use of pronouns and antecedents. 3 things here that I have listed. Be consistent, be clear, and be obvious. Be consistent. You must pick up your ticket before taking your seat. We would not say one must pick up one's ticket before taking your seat. We want to be consistent with the usage of pronouns and antecedents. Then we want to be clear. All of the ladies wore dresses. We would not say all of the ladies wore a dress. That would be sort of crazy and ridiculous, would it not? That would sound like all of the ladies wore a single dress. But all of the ladies wore dresses. Each of the men asked for a raise. We would not say each of the men asked for raises. So we want to be clear. We want to make sure that our pronouns and antecedents match up. And then be obvious. Jeff and Cody fell down and he broke his leg. Well, which one? Was it Jeff or Cody? We would rather need to say, to be perfectly clear and obvious, Jeff and Cody fell down and Jeff broke his leg. So, be consistent, be clear, and be obvious. And then finally, we want to make sure that we are striving to make it as easily understandable as we possibly can. Consider these 4 sentences. When a man or a woman falls in love, he becomes absent-minded. Well, in this sentence, we're focusing on the man with that pronoun he, but the sentence says when a man or a woman. So he leaves out the woman. Well, look at the second sentence. When a man or a woman falls in love, they become absent-minded. Well, here we're going from a singular subject, man or a woman, to a plural pronoun, they. So that's rather sloppy. Number 3, when a man or a woman falls in love, he or she becomes absent-minded. Now, that is correct, but it seems a little bit overly correct. So in a sentence like this, it would be best to reword the sentence. When men and women fall in love, they become absent-minded. So now we have men and women, both plural, and is followed by the plural pronoun they. When men and women fall in love, they become absent-minded. So the third sentence is correct, but maybe a little bit of a stretch. The second sentence changes from a singular to a plural, so we don't want to do that. And the first sentence just the pronoun focuses on one or the other and leaves the other out. So we want to be as precise and clear and consistent as we possibly can when we're using pronouns and antecedents. Well, this brings us to a conclusion of week 7, and you're now ready to take this week's quiz. And again, let me remind you, you can refer to any and all notes that you've taken, but you do only have one attempt at the quiz, and you have a 1-hour time limit. So make sure that when you start, you have an hour set aside free of disruptions and distractions, and so that you can complete it in a timely fashion. And I will look forward to seeing you again next week as we continue in English 102.